left, right.
Welcome to the future. This episode, we are talking about the future of jobs. What jobs will exist in the future? Which new jobs that don't exist now will exist in the future? And which jobs that exist today will not exist in the future? By the way, this is recorded in the past. You can always catch us live on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and you can feed us your questions live, real time. If you're watching this or you're listening to this post-production, you can always DM me or you can email me your questions. We will answer them on air. Next episode, actually, we will be answering a whole bunch of your questions. So stay tuned for episode 177. But for now, let the future commence. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, it's good.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, we are live and we're back. Welcome everyone to SipTalk, episode 176. Today we are talking about jobs of the future. My name is Justin DiGiulio, out of my basement in New Jersey, joined by James, the Bosnator Boswell, out of Charleston, South Carolina. James is a philosopher, a bartender, a professional referee, and most exciting of all, an accountant. James, nice to see you.
Yep, those last two jobs are the ones that are killing me right now. Had 5 games over the weekend, and I'm just starting to recover from it today. And then accounting just continues to be a grind.
So, good reason to have a drink tonight. What are you drinking?
I am drinking the last of my Edmund Oast's sour strawberry rhubarbs.
Ooh, strawberry rhubarb. It's springtime, so a lot of growing going on. I don't know what you did over the weekend outside of refereeing for leisure and recreation.
Didn't have time to do anything besides that.
Damn, man, I planted grass. I planted some grass over the weekend, so I'm very excited for my grasslings to start to pop up. I got a bottle of Talisker Storm. I'm gonna give that a shot. This looks like a newly designed bottle, so it's probably a one-off, not a super common bottle of Talisker, but it's a nice bottle of scotch, and I plan to enjoy it over the course of this episode, in which we're going to be talking about jobs that will no longer exist in the future, and we'll be talking about new jobs that don't
exist yet.
Yeah. So what do you want to get started with first? Should we lead with the?
I think we should talk about the stuff that's going to phase out first, and then that naturally parlays into what it will transform into.
Okay, so that's the most contentious part, right? That's what we were talking about right before we went on air. Yeah?
Yeah, so
you have some opinions on this.
Yeah, so I think that the list that you sent me from Monster UK lists 10 jobs, and if you want to just go back and forth, I think we should talk about each one individually instead of just running down the list.
No, I'd like to do that. I'll let you hit this list, and then we'll discuss it.
All right. So the first one, travel agent jobs.
So when was the last time? So I remember as a kid, my mom calling the travel agent, and we would book through a travel agent. When was the last time you traveled, and did you use a travel agent?
In the past 10 years, I think I've done it once, and it was when I was on a business trip where the company that was flying me somewhere used a travel agent because they were coordinating probably 80 or 100 people from all over the country traveling to the same location. So having a travel agent do that instead of the company do that, or having the employees book their own travel, was easier for them.
But the company...
And so the company ended up paying for it, but it was one of those ones where instead of having it being handled by somebody in the company, they outsourced it to a travel agency. What I would say is, those jobs won't exist in the future because they don't really exist now, or I don't think that they're going to go completely away, because there still is a use for people in like for large companies that need to like coordinate things. Or yes, there are websites where you can kind of plan every aspect of your vacation, but if you are rich enough, then you're going to pay somebody else to do that work for you. You just call up your travel agent and be like, "Hey, I want to go to Fiji for a week. Find me flights, find me a hotel, find me a nice resort, and find me an activity or two to do while I'm there." And because if you do that on your own, that's probably an hour or two out of your time. And if you're rich enough, you'd rather just spend the couple $100 to not waste an hour or two of your time.
Well, I think the
So,
travel agent is when you're trying to be all inclusive. So when you not all inclusive as in an all inclusive resort, but you want one person who's going to plan the flights, and they will also plan the hotel, and they will also plan the excursions.
right.
Yet, if you're just going to book a flight and a hotel, which is honestly super easy, you're barely working. You're not getting on the phone anymore. You're barely doing any work. You're just logging into Google, or you're going to the airline website. Right now, I just type in flights to Florida, flights to Dominican Republic, wherever I got to go, hotel in New York City, and Google has this. It allows you to book through Google, and it compares the prices, so you get the lowest price. That seems pretty easy.
Yeah, but even think about it, for people that are rich enough that even like 15 or 30 minutes of something is too much work for them to do. That's where you have a travel agent. So I don't think that it's going away, but it's certainly not a growth industry.
Yeah, I think it's going to shrink. I will.
Yeah, but I don't think it has much farther to shrink.
Yeah, fair enough. But I don't see it going away entirely. You're right. But it's pretty much non-existent in most of our lives as things are now. Where do you get next?
Next, hold on a second. All right, next one, cashier jobs. And they say the rise of self-service checkout suggests that cashiers may one day become obsolete. And they talk about stores having like RFID systems on the items, and you just check yourself out. And I think this is one of the ones that is probably the most incorrect.
You think cashiers are going to continue to exist in 10 years?
Hmm.
And because of you don't think RFID is going to take off? What's your, because I think cashier jobs I'm watching them vanish, but what's your take?
That in order to implement a system that works well is going to be very capital intensive. And so maybe the largest stores would try doing something like that, but any small or medium sized business is probably going to look at the initial capital expenditure as too high compared to the relatively menial wages that they're paying their cashiers. And you might see more self checkouts, but how many times have you gone to a store and had an issue with self checkout that you've needed to have like someone assist you with and swipe their card and type in a code so that they could override whatever error you were getting on the computer?
So,
You think that
yeah,
those systems are going to be perfected? I don't.
well, I particularly enjoy cashing myself out and not cashing myself out entirely, um, because actually there have been times, I'm joking, but there have been times where I've walked out of the store and realized when I got home that I didn't pay for something,
Right, and
or
so that's
actually I
the
tried to return things and they weren't on the receipt at all, meaning I didn't ring them up.
yeah.
And
So that's another issue is like inventory shrink is already like kind of enemy number one in retail, and having a system where you're trusting the customers to cash themselves out accurately is going to increase shrink by a huge amount. Like even with honest people like you and me, mistakes get made. Now take dishonest people,
yeah,
like
but that's where the RFID system comes into play, where you have items that are marked. How does RFID work? By Bluetooth or what?
no
Or
radio
just by
frequency.
sensor? Radio? Okay.
RFID, radio frequency ID.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. So these are, but that's a little more expensive at this point in time than self checkout. I
Yeah,
know there's
and
like
also
Amazon stores.
think about if you run a business that's relatively small, uh, well, actually, let's start with the really big. So think about Walmart. If you were to walk into just a random Walmart somewhere, how many different item SKUs do you think exist in that single Walmart?
There's got to be maybe in the six figures, hundreds of thousands.
I wouldn't be surprised if you had 100,000 or more
Yeah,
individual SKUs for items in a Walmart. So
and that's where
now,
RFID gets more complex. Yeah.
right? So now try. You're gonna have to have 100,000 individually programmed tags, and then in multiples because you don't have one of just each item.
Yeah,
Think
that's
about how colossal. Like, think about how much more difficult that is than having, because like most of the SKUs are going to be based off of like the manufacturers. Like the manufacturer makes the item and puts a tag on it, and Walmart probably just programs that tag into their system, so that way they don't like. Walmart will probably then like at one point have a reference table where let's say the manufacturer SKU is 1 2 3 4. Walmart probably says it's Walmart SKU W1234. And so they just have a map of every time that they get a new item, they just look at whatever the manufacturer SKU is, and then they just map it to a Walmart SKU. And then you don't have to print out individual tags for each of those. You can just use the tag that was on the item that the manufacturer shipped to you, and when you scan it in, the software just does a quick comparison and says, okay, M1234 equals W1234, price is $10, go. Now think about having to every single item that walks in the door is going to need to be manually tagged with the correct RFID.
well,
And you're going to need to have enough RFID chips for every single item in your store, and they all need to be programmed and operating correctly. And you know how easy it is to defeat RFID?
just cover it.
You
No
just
idea.
wrap if you wrap an RFID tag 100% like completely around with tinfoil, then that's a pretty guaranteed way to defeat like anti-theft because anti-theft devices work on RFID. So if you want to steal something, like I'm not encouraging you to do this, but if you want to, wrap the RFID thing 100% around with tinfoil, and you'll probably get away with it.
Well, you got to be ballsy enough to bring and you got to be able to get tinfoil into the store. Tinfoil, in my experience, is quite noisy. But
Right, but the
if you
point is that
if you're bringing a square of it and you want to steal one particular item, I guess that might work. But look, I think cashiers. I mean, I go to the bank and they incur. There's one person at the teller window and there's six machines. There's a Target near my house and the line can be winding through the fucking store, like 50 yards long, and around the corner, and it's all people lined up to go to the self checkouts, and there's one person manning a register, which to me is fucking insane that they let the line get that
well,
big.
part of that is that retail has just like trimmed their staffing to the absolute minimum skeleton crews. So that's more on the way that big box retail is staffing themselves.
Yeah, but
Like, and
I
I'm
see
not saying
cashier
that like
jobs.
I'm saying that self checkout will continue to rise, but purely autonomous, like 0% staffing cashierless retail, I don't think is realistic.
No, I agree with you completely. It's not that you're going to walk into a store that has no employees and that there will be employees manning the area and there for assistance. But I do see cashier jobs being something that virtually disappear the way that we know it today. So a couple
In
years
terms
ago,
of like the cashier scanning in every single item, yeah, that probably starts to dwindle. But if you think of cashier as assisting with self checkout and occasionally like and probably having one or two people on staff to actually manually check out customers, like that's just not going away.
yeah, no, there's always going to be someone there. All right, let's hit the next one because we could talk. I feel like cashier jobs. We
Yeah,
both really
yeah,
get
yeah.
into.
Telemarketer jobs.
Okay.
This is one that I don't think is going to make anyone sad.
So the first line of the note under this one in the article is notice a rise in the number of robocalls. I think we all have. I get them in
Yeah.
Chinese and in Spanish as well as English. And since my number is all over the internet, my phone rings nonstop. I get a ton of telemarketing. But the one thing that I would think is that when the phone rings and it sounds robotic or it sounds pre-recorded, I always hang up. But almost always when it's a real person, I don't want to hang up on them.
So my strategy for robocalls is if I get a call from a number that I don't recognize, like if it says like spam detected or something like that, I just won't answer. But if it goes through, what I'll usually do is I'll answer and then pick up and not say a word.
I I do that sometimes too. Um, but yeah, I think telemarketer jobs definitely will shrink because of the robocalls. But also now we get text messages that come through that are like spam text messages. It used to be email, and then it was phone calls, and now we're getting text messages. So I think there will still be some telemarketing because I think the actual human on the other end of the line sticks. I think some people stay on the line a bit longer, but I don't
Yeah,
think we'll.
I mean, I don't know if that's so much a job as that it's going to just end up being scams because
Well, what
like
about collections?
the
What about collections?
um people who are in collections tend not to answer their phone no matter what.
All right, let's hit the next one here.
Next one's going to be safety inspector jobs. And the idea is that like a lot of safety inspection is going into by definition dangerous environments. So you think of like mines or like the top of wind turbines, places that are difficult and dangerous to get. And with a drone, you can get there pretty easily. And if something bad happens, you lost a drone, not a person.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll buy that, but I still think you need that visual, that human element to
I wouldn't say the visual. I would say that like let's say you need to inspect a wind turbine. So you probably want to look at like the actual gears and like the machinery in there. And a drone's not going to be able to like easily access those panels. You still need someone there to get up there and manipulate and move stuff around. And drones aren't very good at that.
Well, yeah, fair enough. But I'll give you one example that where the human element plays a factor. My car right now runs fine, and there's no lights on under the dash. But when I'm driving it, I can feel a slight vibration, and I know something is not perfect. I think it's a one of the weights on the wheels. So you get a slight vibration. But that's something that it takes an actual person to be able to be there and diagnose. Not that it's a catastrophic, there's going to be a catastrophic failure because of it, but there's a human element of getting a feel or a vibe that's just not right, and over
Yeah.
time it could cause some issue.
And
But
that's
but
really
you're right.
difficult to program in. I think that there's going to be more applications for drones in the future, but they're like much like you've said, there are some things that it's virtually impossible to replace a human's ability to do.
All right. Well, here's the next one when it comes to drones and robots.
Assembly line worker jobs. This is probably the one on the list that I agree the most with.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some assembly line work that hasn't already been automated and what's holding it back from being automated. Can you think of anything that we still have on an assembly line? I can't think of a human assembly line that we off the top of my head right now. Am I missing something? That's very
No,
common.
the only thing because the type of jobs that I'm thinking would be harder to automate would be the actual machining. So like when I was in accounting, every year I would go at the end of the year to do inventory for an aerospace parts manufacturer.
Hmm.
So these are the people making like the nozzles and the valves that go into like jet engines or space engines.
Hmm.
And so they just have like big blocks of steel, and then they'd have these crazy complicated machines with people operating them, machining things to within a thousandth of an inch. Um, and like a lot of it was them programming the machine to do things, but there was also a lot of like hand work that went into this, where like you've got the machine to assist you in terms of the precision that you're using, but it would be really difficult to program a robot to be able to do something like that. So when it comes to, but I don't look at that so much as an assembly line, because like they did all custom parts, so it's not like there would just be like a block of metal at one end of the factory and a finished part at the other end of the factory, and like people working on it in sequence.
Yeah, it was
It
one
was
person
more like a
start to
machine
finish.
shop where like there's a project going on over there and there's a project going on over there, and like there's sectors of the factory that kind of had machines that do one thing or another, but it wasn't like the same part just being made over and over.
All right. Yeah, I can't think of anything
But
that's standard
but
issue.
like true assembly line work, I see that it's already been heavily roboticized, and that trend's only going to continue. And contrary to what I was saying before about um, like cashier jobs and RFID and capital investment in robotics is much easier to swallow for a company because one, it's skilled labor, and those robots are directly producing things versus the RFID is you are spending a ton of money to get back to to where you already are. You're
Yeah.
not getting ahead. You're just trying to drop a whole bunch of money to do what you already do.
Yeah, there's no real savings in that. All right, hit the next one because
Yeah. So we said assembly line workers, newspaper delivery jobs. Yeah, that's one that probably just needs to go away. As both of
well,
us
one we
have
don't,
experienced directly what newspaper delivery is like.
one of the funniest stories that it doesn't come out funny in the story, but I'll tell it anyways. Is I had a newspaper delivery job for about a week, and I was staying at my family's lake house, and then they kicked me out of the lake house midweek after I got this job. So I was living a half hour, 45 minutes away. Either way, we had to be at the paper depot at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So we ended up I would recruit someone to help me because I needed to stay awake in the car. And I think a
I
few
did it
times
once or
maybe,
twice with you.
yeah, you came with me, and we had to get all the papers together, roll them all up, put them in the car, and then we had to go address by address, follow the map. And you took this one paper and you wound up and you whipped it out the window, and like a frisbee, it caught the air
It
and
started
landed,
turning vertically, and then it switched to horizontally and generated lift.
and it just landed on their roof, which which if you're coming outside to get your New York Times or whatever, this was the Saratogian newspaper, and you can't find it, and you walk to the end of your driveway, and then you're like, oh, it's not here, and then you walk back and you see this newspaper
No, we
on
gave them
your
another
roof.
one. They got a free newspaper that day.
Oh
But
man, and I probably got docked 50 cents from my pay.
oh no, they didn't
Yeah,
inventory your newspapers. They gave you more than you needed every day.
yeah, I'm joking.
But
But
so yeah, newspaper delivery jobs. That's something that like seems like of all the things would be one of the easiest to automate by drone. So you probably have one person that does a delivery route, but like they're gonna have probably let's say like army of 10 drones or something, and they just have like a pickup truck with a whole bunch of bundles of newspapers, and then they go to one location, send out 10 drones, drive 200 yards, send the 10 drones out again. Because one of the big hazards for drone delivery service is that not all packages are as unfragile as newspapers or as lightweight as newspapers. So getting a drone to be able to deliver something that weighs anywhere between 5 and 10 pounds and can't be dropped from more than like 6 inches above the ground, that's a hard problem for drones to solve. But
and this is for but sorry, go ahead, finish what you're
But
saying.
yeah, if you're trying to deliver a newspaper and the drone misses by a couple feet or it drops it from a little bit higher up, undamaged, who cares?
And they're all the same size, at least for the day. But
Yep.
the other thing is, yeah, it's easy. It can easily be automated and turned into a drone service. One, like Domino's, I think is already doing that with pizzas. Two, there's a lot less people reading and subscribing to physical newspapers right now.
Yep.
So I think that's going away completely. I also read about mailman jobs disappearing soon because a lot of people think about what you physically send in the mail. When was the last time you mailed anything physical from your mailbox?
Times that I've had to mail something because I don't have stamps on me, like I go to the post office and like buy a stamp and mail it while I
And then
am
drop it
there.
at the post office. But it's my guess is it's probably fewer than 6 items over the last 6 months. So fewer than one item a month. However,
That would be
I can
correct.
get I can guess that what you've had in your mailbox was the majority of times not requested. So it was people mailing you
Probably
things that
about
you did
70 to 90% of my mail is stuff that I don't really need.
exactly. So what's going to happen is, I mean, bills right now, almost all bills are paperless, or at least should be. And I just don't. I think we have a lot lower utility for physical mail, and that means if the item that mail carriers are delivering has less utility, at
Yeah,
some
but
point,
remember the mail carriers. A lot of there's still a lot of freight that's delivered by the U.S. Post Office in terms of online ordering. So the post office still delivers a ton of packages, even
well, that
like
yeah, but that's where I see mailman becoming more like a FedEx or UPS like service,
they're
less of
already
a
in that direction.
yeah, but fewer and fewer letters and actual paper mail. But I think we can both agree on
Yeah.
newspaper and mail disappearing or changing, similar to like cashiers.
Yeah.
Next one, and
Next
this
one,
one
near
is,
and dear to my heart, referee jobs.
what are your thoughts on this? Because I don't see who wants to be watching a sports match that's like watching a video game where there's no margin of error, there's no judgment calls. It's all computerized, all the
Yeah.
calls.
So there are kind of two categories of rules in sports. There are kind of empirical rules, and then there are arbitrary rules. So empirical rules, you think about like in a baseball game, like where the ball lands on the field, like you hit, and if the ball lands on the wrong side of the foul stripe, it's a foul ball. If it lands on the right side of the foul stripe, it's a fair ball, right? So there's not really interpretation there. It's just where did the ball
Mhm.
land? Or in tennis, like a serve, is the ball in or out? Well, we can look and see where the ball landed. And
Okay, so where are you going with this?
so you can automate those kinds of things. And in a lot of sports already have. Like tennis has Hawkeye for players to challenge a referee's call of in or out,
But it's
and they
still
can
on
have
the
the video
referee
re.
first. It's still on the
Well,
referee
yeah,
first.
but there's no reason why you couldn't if you had the system set up so that way it gave like a loud buzzer for a serve that's out. If it
Yeah.
was fast, but the problem is it needs to be as fast as the referee would make it, which is probably within two 100ths of a second of the play, because if you're serving, like if you're receiving the serve, you don't have much more than 2/10 of a second after the ball hits the ground to hit the ball
Yeah.
back.
It's all instinctual.
Yeah.
And same thing with a
You
good
have
referee.
yeah. So for and baseball is toyed with the idea of automating strike zone calls using
Ooh.
similar technology of we can 3D map the path that the ball took through the strike zone or not the strike zone, and you can just build a 3D space for what the strike zone for each player is, and then using the video you could probably within a half second say whether it was a ball or a strike.
So, but I
Um,
feel like you were saying that there's an element that can't be automated.
so that's where so the
So what is
arbitrary
that?
calls fouls. What is and what isn't a foul? So
In something
let's
like
think about
football,
football.
soccer,
What's
yeah,
pass interference?
basketball.
When is something pass interference and when is it not? When is it offensive holding or defensive holding? In
Well,
soccer,
that's analyzing like intention of the opposing player, right?
not necessarily. One of the big things that we're taught as referees is like you can't read intention. You have to go by what happened. Like what the player meant to do doesn't matter. It's what happened. Because if you have in soccer, for example, a slide tackle where the player's foot skids off the ground, goes up over the ball, and then their cleats go into the other player's shin, like that's a red card. Did the player mean to do that? I don't know. Maybe it was an accident. But the result of the play was you went in with your shins to the guy's stud above the ball. That's a red card. And if the player says, "But I didn't mean to," and you could say his shins in two pieces, and that's where your cleat contacted him. Here's your red. That's what happens. And to be able to get a computer program to be able to, in real time, have the angle necessary to see what happened, and be able to recognize all the factors of a foul or a not a foul, is really difficult. Secondly, and this is really important in soccer, is there's the entire concept of advantage, which is the referee saw a foul, but realizes that calling the foul would put the team that would receive the foul, so like, I'm going to get a direct free kick because of this foul. But by stopping the play and forcing me to take the free kick, that takes away the advantage that I have because I was able to get out of that foul, and now I have less defenders in front of me. So yes, it was a foul, but it's better for the referee not to call it because we've got the play still. And what is and isn't advantage is really, really difficult to explain unless you have a video in front of you. Like, it's always a case by case. And it's oftentimes a player by player decision where when I'm refereeing higher level games and I see a player get fouled and the play continues on, or I actually formally give the advantage, I'll oftentimes go back to that player and say, if I didn't blow the whistle and like I didn't announce advantage, I'll oftentimes say, hey, I saw you were getting fouled there, but you were able to lay the ball off to your teammate and he kept on going. Like, you lose the ball there, I can call the foul for you. You good with that? And some players will say, no, man, I'd rather just have the foul today. And other players are like, yeah, I'm good with that. We kept going. And
it's your judgment call to make as the referee.
It's my judgment call to make, but it's also a way for me to work with the players to give them the kind of game they want to play.
All right. Okay. Cool. Hit the next.
And I don't see how you could ever get a computer to do that.
I think you summed that up very well. It's your job to give them the game that they want to play. All right. Hit the next one here because we're
train driver jobs. This one I agree with.
Well, yeah, I feel like that's automated driving, except way easier. You're not even turning, really.
Yeah, because train tracks, you could very easily program zones where when the train passes, you could just have like a little QR code or something that the front camera of the train sees, because trains have speed limits too in terms of the banking of the track and everything else. Yeah. So in a straight line, the train's going 100 miles an hour, and then it's coming up to a curve, and so a quarter mile out, there's a QR that says 80, and then when you get to the curve, there's another one that says 50, and so the train camera reads the QR code, dials down the speed, makes it through the curve, because you don't have to steer. There's no steering wheel on a train.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's an easy one. All right, next,
nurse jobs.
I disagree with this one.
I completely disagree with this one.
I think that we're going to actually see a lot more medical care staff. And I think that as there's more people unemployed as a result of technology, and there's more people spending more time at home and more people involved in virtual reality, we just think of the dawn of television, and which was a major boost in technology, and then the amount of time that people spent at home consuming television obviously skyrocketed before television was commonplace, and people got sicker, people got unhealthier, so they needed more health care. And I think health care is something that requires a personal.
Well, the article says like robot nurses are already well established to like carry meals, I don't know what post means in the nursing world, like change bed linens, like deliver drugs and dressings to patients, but like, if you're just delivering pills that a patient needs to take, sure, you could just have like a little robot with like deliver a tray to a room, or if you need to have a robot take away old linens, sure, but like someone still has to put new linens on the bed. And if it's an injection, do you really want a robot administering your injection?
But also, no robot is going to be changing diapers. So Yeah, I disagree with that one. All right, let's hit the next
I'm
one. 'Cause
saying changing linens of like changing the bed linens. We're like,
but but I'm saying changing diapers, which is a real job that that nurses actually do. So
yeah.
I
So I
believe
don't
nurses.
think I really disagree with that. I think like some of the absolute lowest level nursing work, maybe that can get automated in some way, but probably 85 to 90% of what nursing is very human centric.
Yeah, hit the next one because that's you
All right,
basically just
last one of jobs that are going away. Pharmacist jobs.
I,
I
I
disagree with this one too.
you disagree. The
Yes,
pills are already made. It's the pharmacist's job is basically putting the pills into the bottle, right?
that's not what their job is.
What is their job
You don't need
that
to
I'm
go to
missing?
pharmacy school for like 3 or 4 years to be able to find a pill in the back and put it into a smaller pill bottle in the front.
So what is it specifically that it's what am I missing?
Pharmacists. So when you get a prescription from your doctor and you take it to CVS and you drop it off with the pharmacist will call the doctor and and verify that the prescription was written by them. So that way,
That
it's like you
easily
can't.
automated though. Easily
That
automated.
part is.
Okay, next
However,
part.
the pharmacist will also be like asking the doctor, "What other drugs is he on?"
But that's easily our healthcare system is super far behind. But all of that
So,
should be
but
available
and
online.
so
Online personal medical profile.
yeah, but the pharmacist will then be comparing the drug that you were just prescribed and making sure that it is safe for you to take given the other drugs you were taking.
Sure, but if we all have personal online medical profiles and everything that's prescribed to us is saved there, which I really think is where we ought to be already, that should be
Yeah.
done pretty easily. We're not there,
Um,
but that's what
no,
we're talking in the future.
but so pharmacists have almost a doctor's level of understanding, but it's just limited to medications and drugs. Um, and so they are going to be able to tease out when there's a problem with a prescription, and also like I know that you or I probably are less likely to ask this question, but when you get your prescription from the pharmacist, they will answer questions that you have about like how to properly take the drug or like potential side effects, and they're kind of filling another role that your doctor can. And I think that aspect is also going to be difficult because sure, I can go online and Google side effects of this drug and how to take this drug like safely and appropriately, but the pharmacist is going to be able to explain that better because I'm going to be able to ask the exact questions I want instead of getting a general answer from WebMD.
Yeah, slightly more personalized. I I still disagree with you on this one, but we'll see how it plays out. So let's hit the future jobs. The jobs.
All
Actually,
right.
before we do that, I just want to go down a list of other jobs that I found outside of this article that I think may not exist in the future. So one is fast food. People that work in fast food. Let's see, bank teller, textile jobs, uh, printed media. A lot of jobs around printed media. Even writers. There's a lot of articles that I read now that are not written by an actual human. Taxi, car dispatcher. Now that we have Uber and Lyft, and I read somewhere lumberjack, but I don't necessarily agree with that. They're just saying that we're
I
using
agree
less
with
and less wood.
the more so with the first few that you listed, like lumberjack. I don't really see how you can automate that job in a safe way.
Well, they're
That
saying
would actually be cost effective for a
they're
company.
saying we're using less wood, and the job is changing a little bit. And then
I
also on
disagree
on the
with
list.
that. Do you see lumber prices in the last year?
Oh yes, and then also up there with lumberjack, and I left this out because I also don't. This is on the same level as lumberjack to me, is fishing industry. They're saying the fishing industry is going to be changing over the next decade to 2 decades, and I
So I
mean I
guess
buy into that a little
there's
bit.
two categories that we need to think about here in terms of one is like industries that are just going to be slowly phasing out, and then the other is going to be industries that are going to continue to exist but use more automated labor. Because if you want to talk about that, truckers.
Yeah, well, exactly. All right, so let's hit these future jobs that don't exist yet, because now we got some catching up to do. We're past our halfway point, guys,
And we're not halfway through the list.
and we're not. Well, this list is longer than
I
the
know, that's why
last
we're
list.
not halfway through.
So, AI ethicist, the job advocate for the ethical and legal matters regarding the creation and distribution of AI-based tech products. The skills: they must be into philosophy as robots, and then fluency in analytics. And apparently, these are jobs that Apple, Microsoft, and Google are already hiring for. So,
I'm not sure that. I think that's like an example of who would be hiring.
no, it says
I
now
don't-
hire. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. And this is careerswithstem.com. And it's an Australian based article. So, but basically the ethics in the background of creating AI and what AI should have control over and what decisions AI should be able to make for people.
Yeah, so I think you'd almost need to have someone with like a degree, like a dual major, philosophy and comp sci.
Yeah, at the very least. Yeah, I think those two would definitely be a prerequisite because you have to have major technical abilities, but then you also have to have that philosophy, ethical, morality type background. I'm going to try
I
to go
don't think
fast.
that's going to be a huge industry, but I think that for like big companies, that having a department that does it would probably that makes sense to me.
It's just a lot of thinking, right? It's a lot of thinking, and then all the people that work in that department don't have to have the philosophy and the coding background.
No,
But they
you
have to
probably
have.
would have some people that are more specialized in one area or the other, and it's like the engineering department says, "Hey, this is what we want our new program to do. Here's all of its capabilities," and it would probably be almost like a legal compliance thing of like the AI ethicists are going to read through it and say, "Here's where you're good. Here's where you're bad. Here are the areas that are problematic but can be fixed."
Yeah, you're going to have the people that code, and you're going to have the people that think.
Yeah, it's almost like an audit team.
Yeah. So next one is a self-driving car mechanic, and I think what they're saying the job to perform maintenance and repair jobs on autonomous self-driving vehicles. Well, that to me sounds like a regular mechanic. My thinking though is that if we have self-driving unmanned cars, they're not going to be specifically self-driving mechanics, but they're going to be mechanics that make road calls. So when a
I think it's
self-driving
also
car,
going to be like when it comes to like self-driving like autonomous vehicles, it's going to be a lot on the computer programming side of like
well, but hang on,
what is going wrong in the computer program to make this thing stop running red lights or
well,
something.
so I think the job will entail somebody going out to service the vehicles on the street, and because vehicles are becoming more tech-based and a lot more on the programming end, that you're going to have more technical issues than mechanical issues. So this person is going to have that computer engineering, technical coding background, just like what you were saying. But I think they're going to be making like house calls, but more road calls. So they'll be going to service these cars on the side of the road because they don't need to be towed to a shop when you can plug in some programming from a laptop at the car.
Yeah, flash the BIOS on your car. Come on.
All right. Let's see. What am I missing on the comments? First, before we hit the next one, I want to say hello to TikTok. I see Jess. I see Therese. Let's see. I see a few people on the TikTok. So say hi to them. Yo quiero entender. Ha ha ha. Okay. Well, we got Wendy Romero who's listening to us on TikTok. I believe she only speaks Spanish. I want to say hi to Glassy, Joe Gilmore Estates that I see on Instagram. And let's get back to this list. So human technology integration specialist. Now, what they're saying is someone to collaborate with teachers to create future-focused learning environments that embrace the newest digital learning resources. And I think
To me,
we
that
are.
sounds like a bullshit title.
It sounds like a title that doesn't exactly match the job description, but the fact that we have kids in schools reading from textbooks, and if you've been to a school, I mean, I have not spent much
I
time
haven't
in
been in a
schools,
school in 10 years.
yeah, and longer for me, but from what I see on TV and in movies, schools of today have not changed very much at all when it comes to technology and things like that. The technology being used in schools, I will say actually during coronavirus, you have a huge amount of the New York City population that were distributed iPads, and I thought that was really cool. And an iPad is, books cost a fuck ton of money. An iPad costs, 800 bucks, or probably you're overpaying at 800 bucks, but you can get the most up to date books on that iPad, and you don't have to spend $150 a textbook
Yeah, the
every
school would
year.
pay a licensing fee because sure, like part of what you're paying for in a book is the IP. A large part of it is going to be the paper and the printing and the actual just mass of the book.
But we also need, in this country, we really need to bring the education sector way up to date, and we need to employ technology to do so. And the
All right,
next one,
next.
telesurgeon, operate on patients remotely via a surgical robotic system. So,
This one's
um,
already existing in small degrees.
in what sense? Because you're not having open heart surgery
I said small degrees.
with somebody who's remote. Like they're still there, being aided by the robot. What
So
am I
yeah,
missing?
so what's the difference between like a lot of surgery today is completed where the doctor is in the room with the patient, but
Hmm.
it's being done robotically and they're controlling the robot from like the other side of the room. And so there have been experiments of like the doctor not being in the room. Like there's going to be a doctor in the room to like definitely an anesthesiologist and probably a doctor there to supervise,
But
but
the
the
specialist,
surgeon
the
might not be in the
surgeon, yeah.
same zip code.
Interesting. Interesting. I can see that taking. Yeah, I can see. I mean, no surprise there. All right, next one. Personal data broker. The job collect personal information about consumers and sell it to other brokers, companies, and individuals.
Yo, this
So,
one's terrifying.
well, the thing is, a lot of companies already collect our personal data, our browsing data, and I don't have an issue with that. But a lot of people have been fear mongered into eliminating companies from tracking their data. And you know what the Nielsen TV ratings are?
Yeah.
Nielsen was a company that basically, I think they either surveyed their customers or installed devices on their
It
cable
started with
boxes.
surveys, and then they developed a device that they would just install on the TV, and it would record like what channel you were watching.
Yeah, so they
And
so
then
they knew.
periodically, like they would just go around, just like you would read like electricity meters. Like Nielsen would just go around to their Nielsen families and just like pull the data from the Nielsen meters, compile it, and that was what the ratings were.
Yeah, and so the shows that got the most viewing, were the ones that had companies selling them commercials at the highest prices. And now we have so many people that are afraid to share their personal information. I think that there are going to be some particular consumers that fit certain demographics that will be prime subjects to sell their browsing history and shopping history and viewing history, et cetera, et cetera. How much time they're spending on TikTok, how much time they're spending on Twitter, how much time they're spending on Facebook and YouTube. So I see. I don't know about a broker, but I think on an individual level, people could potentially be selling that. Maybe their
And
cell
right now,
phone
everyone's
company.
giving it away for free.
Yeah, but maybe their cell phone company comps them, 50% off the bill or $50 off the. I think a ton of people would be like, "Oh, you just want access to this, and you want to knock $25 off my bill? Fuck yeah!"
I was on the phone with like my insurance company updating my policy, and they asked me if I wanted to download the app or whatever and save 10%. And I said no.
Oh, for the
Like,
car
yeah,
or
where
for
I
the
get traction
motorcycle?
driving and stuff like that. And I says I will pay 10% to not have you guys know what I'm doing at all times. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the vehicle insurance companies want you to download an app which tracks your speed and your acceleration and your braking, so they know if you're an aggressive driver and how fast you're going. And if you drive the speed limits and you don't drive aggressively, you will get a reduction on your bill. Fuck that shit.
Yeah,
No way.
I wouldn't even take that deal if it meant my insurance was free.
Yeah, well, because you and I fall outside of that category. All right, I got 10 minutes left, and I'm not even I'm almost a third of the way through this.
All right, let's keep
3D
going.
printed 3D printed chef, a professional cook who whips up meals by programming a 3D printer. All right, so I got the mashed potato cartridge, I got the gravy cartridge, and I got the hot dog pink goo cartridge, and you're gonna
I feel like
construct
that
a
one's
meal.
really far off. Like 3D printing has its uses, but it's also still like a new technology, and like being able to get 3D printing to work with food that doesn't taste awful is just it's way out there right now.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with 3D printers is that they print on an XY axis, and it's very restrictive. You just think they're basically they're going this way and this way, but
Yeah, it's X Y and then go up one Z, X Y go up one Z. So you print in layers.
yeah, but there's no lateral printing, and which is when it comes to the structure, it messes with the structural integrity because you don't have. I'm just thinking about like I've seen some 3D printed foundations for homes, and to me they don't look as stable as a traditional foundation for a home where you get pressure from the sides that hold it in place while it dries.
Yeah, I don't see 3D printed chef as being anything more than a novelty that's like a couple restaurants do.
I I would love to read more and watch some YouTube videos about 3D printing technology where you can download recipes and you can. I mean that could be fucking huge, but I can't
I don't see it.
picture. Yeah, it just doesn't come together in my head. I'm thinking of Back to the Future, where they put like a little tiny disc in their microwave, and then 8 seconds go by, microwave dings, and they're like, "Oh, we just we rehydrated the food," and they come out with a full 18-inch pizza out of the.
Yeah,
out of the
that's not
microwave.
going to happen. Let's hit the next one though. This one will be pretty quick.
Yeah, this one's easy. Commercial space pilot. Well, that's already basically a job, and luckily, those pilots are getting paid what our original airline pilots were getting paid back in the 60s and 70s, probably more right now. And I do think that we're going to see a rise in. I mean, we've seen a rise, but I think we're going to see a much greater rise in commercial space flight. Which is pure recreation. Like there's very limited utility.
Yeah, but
except
you
for
can
the
like
sake of doing
you
it.
can expand that just a tiny bit, and like right now, most airplanes fly at between 35 and 40,000 feet. If you were to raise that flight ceiling to 100,000 feet or whatever, it would require considerable engineering in terms of the airplanes, but your top speed's a lot higher, and you could have flights moving at like Mach 3 or 4, and like a flight that takes 12 or 14 hours might only take like 2 or 3.
But
The technology's not quite there, but it's a proven concept. It's just not commercially viable.
yeah, I just meant for recreation to hit some 0G and then.
Oh
just,
yeah, yeah.
and
But
just
there's also a transportation argument for it if technology progresses a little bit further.
Yeah, well, I mean, planes right now have, the higher they fly, the less resistance they have. But I think they have poorer fuel economy because there's less oxygen up there. So I think that's the trade-off right now is how high you go and what your fuel economy is. So you think
you
it would
have
be
to
better
have
because there's less
different
resistance.
types of engines for different altitudes.
And then also you have a further distance to go because you now have a further circumference that you're traveling basically.
That is so minor.
Okay. All right. Next
If
one
you're
on
looking
here.
at a 1,000-mile trip, the extra 7 miles to like go the extra
Well, yeah,
7 miles up and 7 miles down.
yeah. No, I mean it's. I don't know what the math is, but I'm sure it has something to do with pi, and
I like pie.
I like pi too.
All right, next.
I prefer the math concept of pi over actual pi, just because it's
I'm
more
the other
fun.
way around. I like a
Mhm.
chocolate walnut pie. All right, coding ethicist.
I don't like walnut. I don't like pecans. In the pie, at least. Coding ethicist. The job ensuring companies adhere to global computing standards of ethics when creating technologies and their algorithms. So
This one feels
obviously,
a
you
lot
got
like the AI ethicist.
it. To me, it's the same idea. And then the question is like, are you going to have punishments for companies that break ethics? Just think there used to be like unwritten rules of ethics, and back in the day, it used to be like attorneys wouldn't advertise their services, right? Like
Hmm.
there can you think of some other unspoken ethics that have are foregone? Can you think of anything outside of the one thing that comes to mind is attorneys wouldn't solicit.
I, 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 this is one of those ones where like my brain knows that there's a ton of examples.
I know I'm in the same place, but nothing's on the tip of my tongue. I just know
Right.
that if I thought about it, for 7 minutes, I could come up with a list of 40 of them.
Yeah, but
But
7 minutes is about how much time we have left, so let's move on.
um, okay, next one is human machine team manager. The job to develop and manage a system in the workplace where human and AI employees communicate to generate a better business outcome.
If I was ever in an environment where I had to communicate with an AI employee, like I'd be at home spending all of my spare time developing an EMP device.
You have to. We're not going to finish this list today. You have to watch this. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Upload, and the idea, and I might have brought it up to you before, but the idea is they basically take this guy's memories and they chop his head off basically and create an AI version of him. But it's supposed to be fully conscious, and obviously with technology we don't have right now. So there's an AI version of him that people in the real world can interact with, and then the AI version of him interacts in the virtual reality world. And I just watched season 2, and now they have the technology to download the AI consciousness back into a physical clone replica of the person. Um, but the fact that
Yeah, there's
people
all sorts of ethical issues there.
lots of ethical issues, but also the fact that people in the real world are communicating with an AI version of a real person, I think is pretty cool. Actually, it's a terrible storyline. It doesn't. It's just a terrible show. But I like the implications and the technology and the stuff that they talk about that you wouldn't normally think of. Like watching Demolition Man, which is just a popcorn uh, movie, but it actually has some really cool ideas in it. Let's hit the next one. This is number 10 of 15. And I suppose, we'll, that's the end of this list for now. Actually, I'm going to hit the next two. AR Journey Builder, the job to collaborate with tech artists to create immersive 3D content that enhances the user's experience. So basically, when somebody's in VR, this is somebody who's building the reality. They're basically a coder, and they're creating design that you experience when you're in the VR. And then the next one, I'll hit this one real quick, is a garbage designer. And this person's job is to deal with the world's massive waste problem by upcycling garbage and creating better quality items. So basically, they are retooling our waste system. And we already know that we do a very shitty job at recycling and composting with natural biodegradable
A
items.
job pioneered in Detroit.
Isn't that where Demolition Man takes place in Detroit?
Oh,
I
I
don't
was
know.
really going to make a knock on like Chrysler.
Um, but it's we're going to have a garbage issue, I think, in the future because we consume a hell of a lot. And I think that the amount that we consume and the amount of waste that we produce, that number goes up every year, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I've never seen stats on this, but I can only imagine that we consume more year over year and we produce more waste year over year.
Yeah. I don't know what the trend is. It's up. I don't know how steeply up. But no, we haven't gotten to the point where like we're reducing yet. All right, next one.
No, we're out of time. So we'll wrap this list in the beginning of the next episode. We got a ton of questions we want to answer too, so I guess we're going to have to hit those in the next episode as well. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, follow on TikTok, Instagram, any of the other social media platforms, and let us know your questions for future episodes because we really enjoy answering those. That's our cue. James, anything you want to add before we roll out?
No, we hit it.
All right. Thank you to Rash Galeb for feeding us your comments while we were live. Hey to Coco Chin Chin. And on that note, we are out. Adios, everyone.
Laters.
See ya. All right. That concludes episode 176. We missed a couple of these future jobs that don't exist yet. You'll have to tune in next episode for that. But in order to catch next episode, it would help you to subscribe to this podcast. So make sure you follow, you subscribe, and interacting with this podcast, whether it's a comment, a share, a subscription, it helps us grow. And we want to grow because right now we're like that little Mario guy. We're just looking for the mushrooms so we can get bigger. So send us some mushrooms, all right? All right, guys. See you next time. Thanks.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.